Delilah, welcome to This Is Horror.
Hi, glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
So, to begin with, I want to go all the way back to the start of your life because I want to talk about what some of the early life lessons were that you learned during your formative years.
In regards to horror or writing, or just like in general?
Any lessons that you had, if you want to link it to horror and writing, you can, but whatever comes to mind.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess if we're coming in hot, if anyone has read The Violence, that's kind of based on the way that I grew up. So I grew up in a house with domestic violence, and kind of my day to day life was pretty scary. So I started finding, comfort in horror pretty early on. Um, I remember reading like Ghost Cat, and then swiftly moved up into Stephen King. I started reading my first Stephen King because I was on vacation with my mom, just her and me and some friends. My dad wasn't there, but I was swimming, and I was doing as many flips as I could underwater, and I started drowning. And she didn't even look up. She was just like reading a book, and I was like, like 10 years old and drowning. And so like I get out, I finally, like get up and like drag myself onto the side of the pool. And I look over and I'm like, whatever she is reading must be the best book in the entire world. And it was Pet Cemetery. And I was like, wow, what's that about? And she's like, you cannot read this. It is very violent. It's very dark. And I was like, cool. And then when she was done, she put it in the library. And I just went and picked it up and read it and was like, this is the best book I've ever read. Which, of course, led me right into it. So I read both of those in about 10th grade, which was real formative. And I just realized that, reading horror lets you practice fear, lets you see how other people process fear and think about it, because quite often we have a very close point of view where we're in the mind of the person experiencing horrific things. So you can kind of see the way their mind works, how they move through it, how they choose to move forward, even when things are scary. So that just got me on a tear for scary books because, I would read Sweet Valley Twins and be like, well, I'm not a twin and I'm not blonde and I don't have a boyfriend. So why am I reading this? And I'd read horror and be like, oh, okay, this is my jam. Um, so yeah, I learned that pretty on. And also, horror teaches us that you can fight the monsters and that sometimes you can't fight the monsters and you just have to survive the monsters, and be the final girl and just, keep crawling forward till morning. So yeah.
Ah, so many directions that I could go in immediately. But I mean, in terms of you acquiring Pet Cemetery in a, let's say, secretive way, I understand that was not your first time taking a book that perhaps you weren't meant to take,
No.
because I understand you unofficially took Richard Adams's Watership Down from the library at an early age after you were refused to be able to check it out. So,
Yeah, I was
what's
in the
going on?
video store. I was in the video store with my dad in second grade, and I just brought him a movie because, back I would find the movie and take it to my dad and be like, "I want this," and he'd be like, "You can't have it. It's too scary." And this was a man who, when I was like 7, thought it was really funny to call me in right when Jaws attacked on the TV. He'd be like, "Bring me a glass of milk," and I'd be like, "Here you go," and he'd be like, "Boop," and I'd be like, "Ah!" So like for him to say I couldn't watch something that was scary was unusual. So he was like, it's based on a book. It's real scary. And I went to the library and tried to check it out. And they said, you are too young. You have to be in fifth grade to check this out. And back then there were no, you didn't have to walk through like the metal detectors. So I borrowed it, um, and read it and took very good care of it. And then I returned it. Um, but it's still one of my favorite books. Like, I mean, I've got a Black Rabbit tattoo. I've got several different copies of it, including the one that I bought when I was finally allowed to buy it and like openly like it. But that's horror too. Like Woundwort is terrifying. That I mean, those rabbits are living through Hazel and Fiver are final girls. They are living through it. Like Cowslips Warren, freaky stuff.
So, do you think then, in many ways, was Watership Down the first horror story that you read?
Um, I'm sure I read something spooky before then. Um, but I read. I was a constant reader. I was, that kid that would go to the library and come back with the big stack. But this was in the early to mid '80s, and so the world wasn't quite as child centric as it is now. There was no such thing as middle grade. I was reading like Dr. Dolittle and All Creatures Great and Small because that was what appealed to me the most. And even that, like James Harriet, like putting a chain on a baby cow and ripping it out of its maw, like there's some freaky stuff there too. I feel like the 80s we weren't quite as worried about damaging the children. Like recently we watched a Return to Oz, um, and you get things like Legend, The Last Unicorn, Neverending Story, Labyrinth, which was like an awakening for me. Like they're terrifying in some ways. All Dogs Go to Heaven. I could just name terrifying things in the 80s for children all day long and be pretty happy about it. So, um, you know, if the books weren't there, then the movies were definitely.
Yeah, I definitely think that things were less sanitized in the 80s and in the 90s. And, even the other day, so I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I thought I'll introduce her to the original Jumanji. I hadn't seen it for a long time, and I thought that this is definitely way more horror and way more out there than, of course, the kind of more modern uh, it's not really a remake, it's just a modern kind of version and interpretation. But, you mentioned Return to Oz, which is, that is a horror story.
Yeah,
And, Labyrinth, that is just a wonderful experience of music, of magic, of fantasy, of terror. Um, but goodness, yeah, you don't seem to get things quite on that level anymore that are for children. But I guess it was because these films, they were for everyone.
yeah,
Anyone could watch them. And the one that is really, really chilling now in 2025 is Mrs. Doubtfire. If you think about what is going on and the plot, and it's like you couldn't make that today. You've essentially got somebody who's been refused access to their children, and then they
yeah.
are breaking in. They're dressing up in a mask that could be Leatherface. Oh my goodness.
It's a different world.
It is. There's no question attached to that.
Just the 80s were messed up.
They were. And you were speaking about how your book, The Violence, is kind of, but based on your upbringing. So that came out in 2022, but at that point, you'd been publishing books for over a decade. So, goodness, when you sat down to write that, was there a lot of reluctance? Did you know that you wanted to have that as your kind of adult novel standalone, or what was going on? What was the genesis?
Well, so the way that I was abused growing up was not a thing you hear about a lot. Like my dad would choke us, kind of unconscious. Like a sleeper hold was how we were controlled, and it doesn't leave any marks if done correctly. Like you can't tell someone who's been choked unconscious. So it's very insidious. And if you told people that this happened, they'd be like, "Oh, I know him. He's a fine, upstanding pillar of the community. He wouldn't hurt you." And you're like, "Cool, man. He does, though." So in my, I think, second or third year of writing, I wrote a YA, and gave it to I'm on my second agent now, and I gave it to my first agent, and she was like, "There's some interesting stuff happening here, but you're trying to write an issues domestic violence book combined with a ghost story combined with a serial killer, and it's just there's too many things in this stew. You got to pick one thing." And she was like, "And also this kind of violence is not realistic. This is not how violence happens." And I was like, "Oh my god, the whole reason I wrote it was to say yes it is." And in the end, after a kind of heated exchange, I think she was like, "Okay, maybe I'm wrong, but you didn't, as the reader, you didn't convince me. So whether or not it's real, it's your job to convince me, the reader, that yes, this is a natural thing that has occurred." So I kind of got mad and put that away for a while. And I was at Emerald City in, I think, 2018 or 2019, before, I guess it would have been, before the pandemic. And I was on a panel and we were talking about domestic violence and that sort of thing. And I remember sitting in my hotel room and thinking, like, if only there was some kind of loophole where you could fight back against your abuser and not get in trouble. Because so often when women do fight back, they get in trouble. Um, or if not outright killed. And so I had the thought of, oh, well, malaria just comes and goes. What if there was a pandemic that kind of was like malaria and that it just kind of randomly came and went? And so when you were in the throes of this, they couldn't really legally hold you responsible for it because, like, you're not there. And that's where that whole book um, came from, was just this idea I had in my hotel room in Emerald City while I was in the bathtub. Um, and so we sold it right before the pandemic, and then I was writing it during the pandemic, which was really interesting because in between the first draft and the second draft, we'd learned how we respond to a pandemic, and I had to do a lot of revising because I thought we were going to be a lot more responsible. We were not. Um, but yeah, it was a very interesting book, and then the wrestling snuck in through a side door, kind of. And I also really probably couldn't have written that book until my dad was dead for a while, and I'd worked through my feelings about that. And uh, yeah, so it's a real special book to me. And I always I think I think it's either in the author's note probably, but just saying, like, even just seeing it, very specific kinds of abuse in books that aren't, the go-to of a TV show, of the, oh, he slapped her, where, I didn't know anybody else in the world was ever hurt that way. I thought we were unique. I didn't think anybody else's parents were alcoholics. So especially in my kids' books, but also in my adult books, I feel like it's worthwhile just to be like, you're not alone. This happens to people, and it's real hard to escape it.
And when you had your agent say, she wasn't convinced that this thing that had actually happened was happening within the context of the story, I mean, that's almost like a kind of gaslighting. But at the same time, when you're taking that story note from the, what was, I think, originally the middle grade book, were there things that you then employed in the violence to try to convince the reader more? I mean, I don't know what you do with a note like that. It's like, this thing happened to me. I'm not convinced as a reader. Well, it
Well,
did.
I mean, I've experienced it with other less painful topics of, like a portal fantasy. You really have to take the reader on the journey. The person in a portal fantasy generally doesn't arrive where they are and be like, "Oh, cool, I'm in such and such a place." Like, they go through a whole thing. So I think I thought of it like that, where you have to really take the reader there. The first book, it was a high school girl and her dad, and you didn't see the violence on the page. You saw her aftermath of it. So, I never wanted it to be gratuitous in the violence. Not the violence, the book, but like, showing this kind of domestic violence, I don't want it to be gratuitous or, in any way titillating at all. I want it to be as terrifying as it was. So, in the violence, which is my biggest book out of, I think, 32 now, it's my longest book. I took a little bit more time to set up how this violence happens, how it gets bad, and then it slows down, then it's kind of a jagged line. It usually doesn't go from 0 to 60. It's usually this kind of more a process as a guy like that loses his cool. So hopefully it seems to have worked in that. But I also just needed to grow my skills. Probably the difference in my writing from 2012 to 2021 is pretty significant.
Yeah, and I mean, you say it's your biggest book. This is almost 500 pages, whereas if people have recently read, let's say, House of Idyll and Guillotine, these are lean, by a technicality, just a novel. They're on that kind of novella novel
We call them
borderline.
novellas for contract purposes,
Yeah, yeah. I
but
I
don't tell
was
Sifwa.
well, I was interested when so I was sent them and I was told that they were they were novellas, and I was like, well, what's the word count? And it's like, if 50,000 words, and it's like, well, it's a novel.
I think I
But
try to keep it under 50, but Yeah, that's I write in so many different genres. I have a lot of non-competes in my contracts, and so I got to where I had a contract in every vein, and I went to my agent and was like, I have spare time. I need to write something. What is left? And she was like, nothing. You have every full length thing you can write out there. And I was like, you said full length, so I can write less than full. So we sold them as novellas, but we did offer them to my full length publisher first, and they didn't want them. So it's all on the up and up. But uh, I think they're all like 45,000 ish. So they're little
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, yeah. So let's ignore the fact that I said they were novels because there is a legal contract. They were definitely novellas. But
It
the
was.
point is that the violence was much, much longer. And I mean, writing about, your own personal, not just trauma, but abuse. This is the very definition of when Jack Ketchum was talking about writing from the wound. But in getting yourself into that place and in tackling, what happened, did you have to put up any kind of protective barriers for yourself? How did you ensure that, it wasn't mentally damaging to yourself to even write the book?
Well, I'm the oversharing kind of neurodivergent where I will just tell anybody, and like it's basically like, look at it, look at my heart, there it is. Do you want to talk about it? Like I am great with talking with feelings. I will answer pretty much any question. It doesn't really hurt me. I don't take psychic damage from talking about my trauma. Um, so it was actually more cathartic. I think a lot of my horror books, I want them to be cathartic, and that when you read them, a lot of them involve violence inflicted towards women, and so I feel like to balance that out, which is a sensation I have to deal with pretty much every day of my life, um, I want to give you the satisfaction of something being done about it. If there's a nasty dude in one of my horror books, he's probably not going to live through it, and you're probably going to really enjoy him dying. So they've all got that kind of good for her energy because in real life I'm just a nice little suburban mom. I don't hurt anybody. And I wouldn't want to. And I think we see women as the soft caretakers most of the time, and we aren't really allowed to lash out or even sometimes show real anger. So I do all of that in my books.
And I mean, so far, probably with this show being This Is Horror, we have spoken mostly about horror, but you really do write the gamut in terms of every genre. You've written erotica, you write a lot of fantasy, there's some science fiction, there's a lot of tie ins. If somebody asks you, what genre do you write, or do you have like a kind of primary definition as a writer, or are you just like I'm a writer, I enjoy writing, I'm not limited by kind of genre definitions?
Yeah, I usually just say I'm a novelist. But early on in my career with my first book series, the Blood series, which I thought was, you know, dark fantasy, and I was told that I was going to put sex scenes in it. It was going to become urban fantasy and dark romance, and I was like, okay, well, let's buy a bottle of wine and figure out how to do that. Um, but with that book, my agent and my editor came to me and they're like, okay, it's time to talk about branding. We need branding for you. Like, what's going to be your brand? And I was like, no, I don't. Like, I'm already working on a middle grade adventure book, and then I'm thinking about this other YA horror. So I already had things down the line that I knew were going to fit into whatever kind of box they wanted to put me into for marketing purposes. So they're like, well, you have to come up, like, you have to give us something. And I was like, okay, everything I do is in the spectrum between whimsical and dark. So some things are totally whimsical, that'd probably be Midnight at the Houdini, and some things are like totally dark, which would be like Guillotine. And so everything is on that spectrum. So that's my first website name was Whimsy Dark, which is still like I hold on to that, and have it also as Delilah S. Dawson. But that's as close as I can come to a brand or a genre. But I think every one of my books, whether it's IP or horror or fantasy, I think they all feel like a me book. Um, they all have certain things in common. And even when I write IP, I really only take on jobs that are something that I would write on my own and that really appeal. I've turned down jobs that I've been like, that doesn't really sound like me. That doesn't sound like I could really put my stamp on it. So, my Star Wars books are full of, trauma and emotions and darkness. Because when I think about Star Wars, they're wars. All of these people are soldiers with PTSD, and I felt like that was an important thing to talk about. And lots of the Jedi kids were super messed up because they were supposed to be like diplomats and monks, and they got turned into murderers. So yeah, it all the horror just kind of gets splattered all over everything, no matter what happens, pretty much.
Yeah, I did wonder what the origin story was with the Whimsy Dark website, in fact, but I love that it's essentially a rejection of being put in a box. It is a rejection of genre label. It's like, I'll give you a genre, but within the name, it is a genre that is all encompassing. Whimsy Dark. It means anything can happen. It means you can essentially write just a very whimsical tale, or if you choose, you can go full Eric LaRocca. So all bets are
I
off.
don't know if I'm going to go that dark, but
But you could with the
but I could.
name. Yeah. I mean, although probably nobody apart from Eric LaRocca should go full Eric LaRocca. But
Yeah, things get dark.
yeah, to understate it, they certainly do. Yeah. But I understand that before you were a writer, you were an artist. So, I mean, I want to talk about your journey in terms of becoming a writer, but I also want to look at like, okay, so was your artist was that like your first job? Were you being an artist alongside another job? What happened after school?
Well, I was a real artsy kid, and my parents both worked for the local recreation center. So I took every art class that they offered. And the day I turned 14, I showed up at the art center and was like, "Will you give me a job?" And they were like, "Yes, we've been telling you that for years. You're here anyway." So I started work there the day I turned 14, pretty much. And I stayed there on and off, all through high school, summers and Christmases at college, after college, until the day I went into labor, pretty much. So that was a really good informative job. And while I was there, I took every class I could take. I taught a bunch of different classes. I have a studio art degree from college, so I took everything. So I can do watercolor, acrylic, oil, and caustic. I can knit, I can crochet, I can weave, I can spin, I can do metalwork, I can do jewelry, I can do photography, clay, hand building. Murals were my specialty. So, like, I've just done a little bit of everything, but I never found my body of work, like the thing that really, tapped into a vein where I was like, oh, this is what I was meant to do with my life. Like, I never found it. And it used to, like, I would watch the movie Great Expectations, like the Ethan Hawke, Gwyneth Paltrow one, and I would cry because there's this scene where he's painting in this big warehouse on these huge canvases, and the song is building as he's painting. And I was like, I want to feel that way. Like, my whole life, that's all I want, is to feel exactly what that dude is feeling right there. It's like the most uh, just natural animalistic flow that he is in creatively, and I want to feel it, and I never did, and I was furious about it. And then I started writing, and I was like, this is it. Like, this is how I'm supposed to feel. Like, I'm finally feeling that swoop. And then I didn't paint for like years because I had started writing when both of my kids were under 3, in part because I needed a creative outlet, and pretty much all of the art media are poison. Like, paint is poison. It's all very bad for you. So my husband was like, you should write a book. So I started writing, didn't paint for a long time. And uh, I've recently gotten, well, not recently, but I guess the past couple of years, I realized adults can just take whatever classes they want to. So I took a year of flame working. So I have, like a bowl of 500 glass beads over there that I made. I'm taking a jewelry class now. And I've been doing a lot of projects. Like, I bought this really mangy old dog chewed taxidermy elk because I collect really old weird taxidermy. Like, I adopt all the musty old mooses out of people's attics. But this elk is just destroyed. His nose is bitten off, and his antlers are, a dog ate them. So I'm dyeing him black to make like the stag from Hannibal. So I'm always doing stuff. Do you want to see something really cool? Do
I
we wanna do a
do.
field trip?
I do.
My
Let's do
daughter
it.
is a vampire, and she, had this locket made from her blood, and it got stolen, so I am, you can see here, I am learning how to pour resin so I can make lockets out of her blood.
Oh my
So,
god.
that's what I'm working on today is, I poured the resin last night. It's got dried and, also wet blood in it, and we're gonna see once the resin cured if it actually worked, so, uh, always doing something artsy.
So, okay, maybe other shows would gloss over this, but I'm not going to. So, you just said my daughter is a vampire. We're not going to just brush past that. So, first of all, how old is your daughter? Just to get some context, and also, what does this mean? What does this mean being a vampire?
She's 19. So when I was a kid, my father was very dedicated to being really, really normal. We were not allowed to look weird. I wasn't allowed to dye my hair or wear expressive makeup. I couldn't wear all black. We had to look normal or we got punished. So I was a goth kid and I wasn't allowed to look goth or act goth. He even like I got into ska and he made fun of that. So um, I kind of was forced to be really normal. And I didn't make my kids do that. And my daughter has kind of followed in my footsteps. She dresses in all black and dark red. When she turned 18, she went and had vampire fangs put in. So her teeth, she has literal permanent fangs attached to them. She is incredible. She's a great writer. Her style is impeccable. Her makeup is on point. Um, but yeah, they on her college campus, they call her the vampire. She does roller derby, and her name is Fantastic, and everybody calls her Fang, and I could not be prouder.
Yeah, I certainly relate to what you're saying about being a goth kid but having restrictions. And I remember when I decided I was gonna go and get my tongue pierced, and I told my parents I'm getting my tongue pierced, and my dad said, I will not speak to you if you do that. And I
Oh,
said, well, this is happening. So now you know. And he's like, well, we're not going to talk. And then I think he kept it up for 2 weeks. He did not talk to me. He just acted like I wasn't there. But it's like, come on. I mean, I'd, I'd, I'd been honest enough to say this is happening. But
yeah.
yeah, he did not like that, at the time when my hair was cooperative, I had long hair. It would be a very sad state if I tried to grow long hair at this point, and then I was wearing like all of the makeup and all of the goth clothes. But I said I'm getting my tongue pierced, and he was not happy. But we talk to each other now. As I said, it was
Because
only two
apparently
weeks.
getting your tongue pierced didn't somehow make you a bad person.
I
Whoever would have
know, I
guessed? It's so
know.
crazy.
Yeah, but there's these weird kind of I was gonna say preconceptions. It's ignorance. Ignorance and stupidity, I suppose.
Well, and I think parents really want their kids to be a smaller version of them. Like they have this expectation of what they want their kid to be instead of who their kid is. That's just heartbreaking sometimes. I have one super goth vampire kid and I have one real normal jock, and that's, we support his sports as much as we support her going to the vampire rave, and we can just love them as they are. But yeah, no, my dad, I when I got my first tattoo when I was 18, I hid it from him till I was 22, and then he saw it because I was on vacation with my boyfriend and showed him the pictures, and he was like, "What's that?" And I was like, "A bruise," and he was like, "No, it's not." But yeah, so when he like more dad talk, I guess, when he was dying, the day he went into hospice for colon cancer, I was there to help him because my mom, you know, it was too much for her, so I was there and I was helping him around. And it was his last time sitting in a chair while we were waiting for them to bring the hospital bed he was going to die in. And we were sitting there and he grabbed my hand and he said, "If I could have one more day that I could walk, do you know what I would do?" And I was like, "Go run at the track." And he was, because he was a runner, and he was like, "No." And I was like, "Go throw the football." And he was like, "No." And I was like, "Go to the Sizzler for all you can eat steak." And he was like, "No, I would put you in my car and take you to that place and have all of your tattoos lasered off." And like that, you're just like, buddy, in 2 weeks, I'm going to be wiping your butt while you die. Like, maybe you could back off about the tattoos. But that was apparently like his dying wish was that I wouldn't have tattoos. So weird. Like, dude, we could have been throwing a football in your head.
I I was gonna say I can't believe it, but I kinda can believe it, but I was hoping because, you were saying you were with him while he was dying, that maybe there was gonna be some redemptive arc to this story, but just like
No,
go it's
no, I
like, "I'm
actually,
going out, I'm gonna be dead in a few weeks, but I just wanted to express my disappointment
well,
in your choices."
that's where this tattoo came from. Was after he told me that I had to go to a bookstore to sign some books. So once we got him settled in the bed and he was settled in there, I had to go run errands. And I drove by a tattoo place, but and I heard the Johnny Cash version of "Hurt," and I was just like crying my eyes out. And so I went and got this. That was just like, buddy, this is the hand that's going to be cleaning you up while you die. Like this is who I am.
I love
So
it. I love it, and I don't know if there's a song where the original and the cover are just both so perfect in different ways. I mean, Nine Inch Nails and Johnny Cash. Oh
yeah,
my god.
that one's pretty special.
But I love the tattoo that you got, and I love, even more so the reasoning behind it. That's brilliant. But
Yeah, there's always a real subtle rebellion to me. Like, I'll do what you say, but maybe not the way you want it.
so back to the writing, because we somehow we somehow moved back into
We got off on the
problematic
dads.
parenting. Yeah. Um, you said that you started writing when both of your children were under three, and then you kind of found that joy that you'd almost been looking for within art. What was the first moment like when you sat down to write, and how quickly did you realize, wow, this is my thing? This is the creative outlet.
Yeah, so I wrote a lot of poetry in high school. I did not deaf poetry, but I did like stand up poetry, poetry slam sort of stuff. And I was in AP language arts, and like I had a good understanding of writing, and I was a huge reader. So like I wasn't going from nothing. Um, but I had tried to write a book once before, and I didn't get past the first paragraph because I couldn't decide on the heroine's eye color. And in my head, everything had to be right the whole time, or the whole book would be flawed. Much like when you French braid somebody's hair, if this one starts out too big, this one's too little, you're never going to get a good braid. So I just got caught on this one paragraph and never got past the first paragraph. Um, but after my son was born, I kind of changed as a person. I read that like the blood male like the blood crosses the female brain barrier, and that it can change your DNA having a son because you're circulating his blood in there too. But like I am in some ways a different person than I was um, before he was born. I feel like I was the same after my daughter, but it's one of those fascinating things that I wish I had like the full scientific understanding of. But I was, that former gifted kid that never wanted to make a mistake and had to be perfect all the time, hence the not getting past the first paragraph. But after that, giving birth, and I was home with these two kids and just kind of trapped in the house all day. And I was kind of going crazy. I didn't have enough sleep, and I started hallucinating because I wasn't getting enough sleep. And I went to my husband and I was like, hey, just to let you know, I'm hearing rats talking in the walls. I think that's a problem. And he was like, yeah, that is a problem. You are so sleep deprived. Like, this is how the US Army tortures people. We need to get you some sleep. We're going to get you on a sleep schedule, and you need a hobby or create. Like, you don't do anything creative anymore. All you do is read and watch children. And I was like, yes, because I'm trapped in the house with them for 24 hours a day. And he was like, so write a book. All you need is a laptop and a table like to write on, and you can put a boppy in your lap and have a sleeping baby there. And I was like, okay. if you watch the kids, I'll write. And so we developed this system where he would take the kids for like an hour every day, whether to the playground or to walk around Target or whatever. Or sometimes he would watch them at home and I would go out to Starbucks back when they were not hostile to people sitting there. And I would write. And because I only had like an hour every couple of days, I understood that I couldn't do that thing where you stare at the white page and wait for the book to happen. So all day long, I would be kind of thinking about it and thinking about it. And when I sat down, it was like furious typing. And they made me take a keyboarding class in high school. So I'm a very fast typer. And at the time, I hated it and was real resentful. But now I'm super grateful. Um, the first book, it took me a little while to get it started because I didn't know how to get an idea. And so I asked my husband because he had written several books that I had edited for him. And he was like, "Well, you just have an idea." And I was like, "Great, more instructions would help." And he was like, "Well, I'll send you an idea every day. And when you find one you like, just write that." So the very first one he sent me was a woman wins a cruise and hijinks ensue. And I was immediately like typing back to him, like, "I can't write this. I've never been on a cruise. I don't know what a cruise is like." And he was like, "I thought you were creative. Like, you've been on a boat, you've been on a houseboat, you've been on a ferry. It doesn't have to be a cruise. Like, you can choose anything. It wasn't, it's not black and white, like any kind of boat." And I got real mad at that because it felt like an insult. So I was like, "I've been on a ferry. I'm going to write a book about a ferry." So I wrote this really bad book about this woman who is on a ferry to Greece, and Zeus, in his historical way, pretended he was her husband and slept with her. And once she had slept with Zeus, she started seeing magical, mythical creatures everywhere. So, like, you would see a regular dog, she sees Cerberus. So I wrote this whole book, and it was kind of chick lit magical realism. And I went through the whole query process, and I got 57 rejections. And a very nice agent said, this book you have some decent skills, but the book is fatally flawed. The readers of this genre won't tolerate infidelity, so this book can't exist. So she was like, "Why don't you write something else and query me again?" And as soon as she said it, I was like, whoop, like threw that book away, started writing the new one, and it was about talking rats in the walls. And from then on, it's just been like this constant flow. And like, I enjoy the writing just as much today as I did then. It's still my little oasis, and I still am just like, "Oh my god, it's happening. This is the best." So it's so much fun. Like, I've never had that whole writing is drudgery, woe is me, tortured artist thing. It's always just been like, "Dude, this is so awesome. I make stuff up all day."
Yeah, yeah, no, I totally relate to that. And I mean, at the moment, like I kind of go between writing most of the time and teaching. And this last summer, I had like all of August off and most of July, and I was just obsessively writing, and it was so fun. It was so liberating, and it's like, yeah, this is. I need more of this. So now I'm kind of setting up my life to make sure that in the future that is going to happen, because we're only here for a finite amount of time. We got to make it count if we can. So
Yeah, I mean, I've got one in college and one in high school, so I've got a lot more time than I did back then. But every year I do a writing retreat at the local lake, and it's, a whole week, and someone else does all the cooking. And I get so much done because you're just there, like by the lake, and it's beautiful, and you just write all day. And it's like, man, what must it be like for somebody like Thoreau, where you just don't have to do anything?
yeah, and talking about your initial journey to writing, and you were hallucinating these rats in the walls. I mean, you were literally living an Edgar Allan Poe story. But I wonder, were there other things that you were hallucinating? I mean, or was that the constant? And how long did it take for you to be hallucinating these things to then raise the issue with your husband?
Well, so my daughter was, I think, around 3 then, and my son was about 9 months, and he did that thing where they totally donk up their sleeping, and I was getting about 3.5 hours a night. We had a full size mattress on the floor of his room that was his bed, and then the door was blocked in with a baby gate. So every night I would go nurse him to sleep, and then when he was asleep, I'd kind of disengage and creep out, and then he'd cry, and I'd come back. And when he wasn't sleeping well, it was just this constant awake, 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 and I could never get the deep sleep because I was constantly waiting for him to cry. So it happened while I was in there, kind of nursing him to sleep in this sort of weird, lucid area. But the bed was in the corner by the wall, and so I don't even know. Like this was, 2010, and again, 3.5 hours of sleep a night. Maybe there was a squirrel in the wall, and I heard scratchings. Maybe it was just my mind having oral hallucinations and making sense of it. But yeah, I thought I heard voices in the walls, and of course, me being who I am, I was like, yeah, it's definitely rats. Um, but yeah, no, like the next day, I told my husband, he's a psychologist, so we do not we do not sit on psychological issues in this house. We talk them out pretty fast, and I'm glad I did because it's worked out really well for me.
And so, do you have any beliefs pertaining to the supernatural, or is it all very much like psychology and science?
Oh no, I mean I have been in places and I'm like, yeah, this is real haunted. Like I've had experiences that I would catalog as ghosts. We lived in Tampa for a few years, and we started out with an Airbnb that we rented by the month while we tried to kind of figure out the area. And there was one night that I was asleep, and I felt a presence, and I looked up, and there was an old woman standing over me, and she just looked kind of confused. Um, and she kind of just shook her head and walked away. And I didn't feel any, like, there wasn't like a fear or a terror. I was just like, oh, okay, all right. And the next day, I was like to my husband, I was like, did you see? And he was like, the old woman. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, she just looked confused. So I don't think that, I don't think it was just me. But yeah, like that house, several of us had experiences with the old woman who lived there. But I do, like, I have a very big imagination. When I was a kid, we would go on the highway. I would look into the forest for unicorns. Like I grew up around Lake Lanier, and I was always looking for. I thought it was Nessie. Apparently, Lake Lanier, we have our own monster, and of course, Lake Lanier is its own monster in general. It's like the most haunted lake ever. It's totally freaky. But I like the feeling of having a rich fantasy life. Like I talk to my cats like they're people, and I talk to the birds outside, and I name my car, and hasn't really hurt anybody yet. So I'd rather have like a fun, rich fantasy life than be like everything is aggressively normal all the time, and so am I.
Which is perhaps what your father was like on the basis of what you've said
Maybe
thus
that's why
far.
he was so unhappy that he had to drink until he blacked out every night. Maybe
Yeah.
it's bad to hold those things inside.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have many cats then? You said you speak to your cats and
We have 2 cats. We have Dwight, who is a tuxedo. He's just a complete idiot, and then we have Pam, who is the traumatized rescue. Um, but we also have a ball python. My daughter's ball python. He's 10 years old now. Because she's at college, we've inherited all of her pets, and then we have 8 tarantulas in the house. So 2 are mine. I'm babysitting 2 for my daughter, and my husband is watching 4 for her. So we're a creepy crawly house. And
yeah.
then like all of
And
my taxidermy, they all have names, and we talk about them like, oh yeah, Elwood was watching the birds. Like it's the whole family. It's like over the garden wall. We're just all super weird.
I mean, your house is almost a kind of exhibition. It is a place of interest. You got all sorts of creatures, you've got
Yeah.
art, you've got
I've got a
taxidermy,
carousel horse. I've got a
you've got a
carousel horse named
carousel horse as well.
Georgiana. You can ride on her. She's sturdy. We've got a Hannibal bathroom where we just put all sorts of weird stuff because we all liked Hannibal. So there's, a jar of teeth. There's paintings done in blood. There's a bunch of taxidermied beetles. There's a raccoon's face. Like we just collect weird stuff and put it in there. So like if somebody's on a walk and they find a dead bee, they just come put it in a dish there. Um, my son's kind of reluctant to bring his girlfriend home, but the rest of us like it.
Well, funnily enough, I was going to mention your son because, I'm remembering you said that like he's like really into sports and he's a
Yeah.
jock. And so is he into all of this stuff too? But is this almost like his secret life that he can't
No,
tell?
he does not like the creepy stuff, he does not like the taxidermy, he doesn't get the ghosts or the blood or whatever, but, he also he likes video games, we all like a lot of the same TV shows, his sister has introduced him to a lot of, I'll walk upstairs and find them watching Elvira, or, I guess recently she showed him Scott Pilgrim versus the World, so, um, but they're both just really interesting, unique people, and you know, it's okay. Like there's enough weird stuff in the house to go around.
Yeah, no, at least he's into, like, I guess more the media, the art,
Yeah.
the video games. He's good with that. He just doesn't need weird taxidermy when he's
Well, we own the torture chair from Captain America Brave New World. My husband and daughter went to the Marvel warehouse auction and they bought this torture chair. So we call it Cherry, and so we all went to see the movie, and we're the only people in there, and every time the chair came on screen, we were like, "Oh, Cherry!" And he was into that too. Like he likes Cherry, so I guess he may not be into the dead stuff, but he likes the torture chair from the Marvel movie.
and if it isn't too personal, what is it that your husband does? Like, I'm fascinated to know what his job is.
Yeah, he's an organizational psychologist.
Ah, yeah,
So
of
he's got a
course.
PhD. He's also got I think he's a third degree black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and he is really into guitars and has lots of guitars. Um, but he also is in on the taxidermy. For one of our anniversaries, he bought me an 8 foot long alligator, and he said it. We lived in Florida, so he I didn't know this was happening. He and my son, he asked if they could borrow my car because his wasn't working. I'm like, yeah, whatever. And he comes back and he's like, oh my, he calls me on my phone. He's like, you have to come outside right now. There's an alligator in the yard. And I'm like, I've been waiting for this day my whole life. And I go bolting out there in my pajamas, and there's an 8 foot alligator in the yard, but it's a taxidermy alligator and it's for me. So he's supportive of the madness. And like I said, he went and bought this torture chair. They waited in line 7 hours to pay for a torture chair.
Ah, I
So
love
he's
it.
in on it.
I love it. You have such an interesting creative family. And, at any given time when somebody arrives home, they could have anything with them,
You never know. He collects Transformers. So we have a Transformers museum in the basement. I think we have over 600, including Unicron, and then we have some of the original artwork from the James Roberts comics. Are kind of the mutual family favorites. Like we all love them. So that's another thing that we all kind of have in common is we just love Transformers.
Just brilliant. And I mean, I wanted to ask with the writing, my understanding is that before you started writing Star Wars books, you had never planned a book before. So I guess you were more kind of pantsing. So I want to know these days when it comes to your original non IP work, what does the planning or lack thereof process look like? What do you have when you sit down to write a new story?
Well, it depends on the genre and what's required. For horror, I usually leave a lot more room, just because horror is such a it's like climbing down a hole, and I don't really know what I'm going to find on the way down the hole. So for something like Guillotine, I have kind of like a list of people, and then I have to kind of figure out as I go. For House of Idyll, I didn't know much about that. A lot of horror is the fun is in the discovery for me. So horror books, I definitely do not plan out much at all. Uh, but in a book, like I'm writing the next Shannara book for Terry Brooks. And so for that one, not only do I have to produce an outline that Terry and his editor double check, but when it's a book that involves very specific places and very specific times, and you have to figure out, how long it takes to get from here to here and from here to here. There's a lot more planning that goes into a fantasy book or a book with definitive stopping points. Um, Trying to think. Yeah, I'm writing my fourth horror novella for Titan right now, and it's just kind of I'm in the stumbling towards or fumbling towards ecstasy phase, where you're just like every day I'm like, what's going to happen today? What kind of horrible little seeds can I plant? How can I torture these people? Which is very fun. So yeah, I guess I've been writing so much horror for the last couple years outside of IP, and that's the most kind of discovery one. But yeah, for all of the IP, you have to have a plan. I follow. There's this book called Story Genius by Lisa Cron. That's kind of the thing I proselytize the most. Of like, if you don't know your writing process, or if you would like to change your process, this book changed my life because it taught me how to plot a book while tying in the third rail of character arc and emotion into it. So you kind of always land the plane. Whereas I used to have books that didn't quite make it there, that punked out after 100 pages, or that were fatally flawed. So even if I don't plan out every single mark of the book, I kind of use the Story Genius method to figure out the characters, their motivations, what they want, what they're doing to get it, what's getting in the way. And so it's kind of like just knowing a couple of stops along the way and having the scaffold for the book. Um, so yeah, I can't imagine writing a book not knowing how it's going to end. I really need to know what I'm aiming for, so that anytime I don't know what happens next, I can be like, that's where I'm going. What am I doing to get there? What's getting in the way?
Okay, so then my understanding for the horror books, then, just to kind of summarize, is it's a lot looser than your fantasy books in terms of the plan, but you have a little bit of scaffolding. You know how it's going to end, but there's a lot of creative license to change things along the way. I'm wondering, in terms of that initial draft, while you're writing and you're in the moment, how much are you then kind of going back and going over things and adding motivations and adding character details, and how much of it is just a kind of mad, glorious rush to the end of that first draft?
Yeah, so I think of first drafts like carrying laundry from the dryer to the bed, where you're holding too much, it's piping hot, you're going as fast as you can, and if you drop a sock, if you stop to get the sock, then the pants are going to fall off. And then when you stop to get the pants, the shirt's going to fall off, and suddenly your laundry's on the floor. So I don't pick up the socks, I just run. So my first drafts are done from front to back, super fast, no stopping. I don't really edit as I'm doing that. You know, I might, if I have to skip a day of writing, I'll reread the last chapter or whatever. But I just go really fast. Most of my first drafts take around 1 to 3 months. I don't think I've ever had one take longer than 3 months. I just first draft really fast. And then, uh, I'll keep a list of things I need to add, like, or I'll put in brackets and be like, emotional scene here, or something bad happens here. Um, and then I immediately, like the second I finish and write the end, I resave it with a new name and go to the front and start kind of smoothing everything out. I call it making the face match the ass, because when you start the book, you know some things. By the end of the book, you know everything. You know these people inside and out. And so I have to make the front just as rich as the back, and also make sure I'm, doing the right foreshadowing, dropping the right hints and the right red herrings kind of all along. So that second draft kind of cleans out and straightens out anything I missed or messed up in the first draft. Um, if this is a book that I'm turning into an editor, that's what I give them as the second draft. If it's a book that I am, writing completely on my own to sell, I'll typically put it away for a while and try to forget about it and do a different project, and then come back to it and then do a third draft after I've forgotten as much as possible, because my brain is, it's kind of all random memory. I'm just go, 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 and it's all based on story. So I will forget everything. If you ask me really in depth questions about, even House of Idyll right now, I might not be able to answer them if you like really drill down hard. And sometimes I'll get questions about Phasm, and I'll be like, "Oh, buddy, I wrote that 10 years ago. I don't know what the purple button did." Um, so yeah, that third draft, I can come into it with uh, very innocent eyes, like I haven't seen the book, and straighten out any further issues. But yeah, it's I think my first couple of books before I had an agent, I ended up with like 13 drafts where I just kept going through them and going through, and I'm just chasing one or two words, thinking like, if I just get this right. And now I'm like, oh no, just throw the second or third draft I give to, whoever's on the other end, and then we'll fix it from there.
Yeah, and I know what you mean about having a kind of brain that's trying to hold so many things, and then if time passes you've kind of forgotten great chunks of your story. And so then, I mean, funnily enough, I had a meeting the other day about a possible film adaptation of one of my
Oh, nice.
books. Yeah. Thank you. But because it had been so long, I thought I better quickly read this book. So I had to reread my own book just so it's like, right, I can be quite sharp in terms of actually discussing plot points, because I find, if not, like, the book that I'm probably obsessed with in my mind is the book that I'm writing now,
Yep.
which, is problematic for when you then have interviews about the book that came out, because it's like, well, I don't know. That was a year ago that I was writing that one.
But I found it's really helpful for, being a writer, it's a really unusual career in that, you every time you write a book, it's almost like you're interviewing for your own job again, with no certainty that the career will continue on in that fashion. Each time you try to sell a book, you don't know how much it's going to make or if anybody will want it. Um, so the fact that what I'm writing now means I don't care about the book I wrote 6 months ago means that if it gets rejected, like, it doesn't really hurt me. I'm like, that piece of crap, whatever. I'm working on this thing now. This is the new hotness, which I think helped a lot when I was querying too. Like, I was always working on the next book when I was querying. So the book that was being queried, if somebody rejected, I'm like, oh, I don't really care. That thing's old news. So yeah, like the always looking forward has helped me. There's always going to be pitfalls in a writing career. But they don't hurt as much if you're putting all of your hope in the next basket and putting all of your focus on moving forward and the excitement of possibility, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the more books that you have, the more tickets to success, as I like to look at them as you say, if one of them isn't a winning ticket, oh well, I've got another one. But if you're just like, I'm gonna query this and I'm gonna not write anything, then I don't know. It's a lot of pressure for that
I
book
go
to.
insane.
Yeah, yeah. So, and also, like, the querying can take so long. A publisher, an agent can hold on to a title for what feels like an almost disproportionate amount of time. But
Yeah,
if
and I
you're
think it's
right,
a lot worse now than when I was querying. Like, I think
right.
things have ramped up.
Yeah, yeah, and I probably because there are so many fantastic and interesting writers. I mean, there's literally more supply than there is demand from the publisher. I think there's a lot of demand from readers, but yeah, just who to query. But also, I guess there's a lot more options. There's a lot more acceptance of independent publishing, of small presses. So I think for writers that can at least be a kind of liberating and an optimistic way of looking at it, even though it might take a bit longer to get a response. You have got so many more possibilities and options as to
Yeah.
what to do with each story. But you said, so when when you're writing the first draft, you gave the kind of the laundry analogy, and so I presume then, so if you realized, okay, in chapter one something, let's say, pretty dramatic had to happen to a character, but now you're on chapter 11, as you don't go back during that first draft, does that mean, okay, from chapter 11 onwards, we're writing the story as if that did happen, and then we're just going to have to make the other 1 to 10?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it might depend. Like, these days I'm not as wedded to my process. I whatever works works, and if I feel like I need to go look something up and change it around, I can. I actually kind of had my whole process got blown up by this book I had out recently. I'm trying to think if I've got a copy somewhere around here. Oh yeah, it's just out of reach. My Marvel Thor and Loki book. It's called Marvel Thor and Loki: Epic Tales from Marvel Mythology, but it is a retelling of the Norse myths, interspersed with some Marvel stories told as if they were myths. And so the book happens in two layers. It's Thor and Loki explaining to the Avengers in real time what's happening, and then they kind of go into the bardic voice and tell the story. Um, so I started writing this book, and suddenly my process didn't work because it's not a point A to point B. There is no point A and point B of Norse mythology. There's no timeline. You tell the story that fits at the moment. And so I had like a little it's like my brain had a temper tantrum at first because I was like, well, what do I where do there's no there's no timeline here. So I had to kind of rethink my whole process and turn it into more of a, each day my job is to take one myth and turn that into a chapter. And so I would read 3 or 4 different sources, double check it on the wiki, and then write it. Um, but it was the first time that I've ever had my process not work, and my brain didn't want to play, and I had like, it wasn't writer's block, it was more like I was just mad because it didn't work. But yeah, that kind of was a good reminder that if your process isn't working, your process can change, and that's okay.
And so presumably there was a moment of panic, after years of this working, and then suddenly it doesn't. So I mean, how long did it take you to adjust and to find that solution?
um, well, I'm a list maker. I've got ADHD and I will forget things. As we've learned, I can mess things up. So I was like, okay, what do we do when we don't know what to do? We make a list. So I was like, we're going to make a list of all of the myths that we want to do. Okay, well, now which one might have come first? Okay, well, we know that you have to start with where the world came from. Okay, thank God. Um, Logically, what would happen next? Well, they're going to probably talk about Yggdrasil. And then, so it's like I had to make this list and then logically put things into order. And then I realized that I had to let the story flow as Marvel and Loki, as Thor and Loki talked. So it's like, each day I would know which one I was going to write. And as I drew to the close, I had to think of what would come next and figure out what interstitial would set it up. Um, so yeah, it was very much a case of when you don't know what to do, make a list, and then the list worked.
I tend to find that, that can apply, that can cross over to a lot of areas of life, and certainly for the creative life, writing a list, writing possibilities, and then, kind of seeing what sticks and where you can go from there.
I mean, just laying out, it's like setting out all of your supplies. You're like, let's see what we have to work with, and then maybe something will stick out at you.
So I think it is fair to say that you are a prolific writer. I mean, we've spoken about the pace that it takes you to write the first draft being roughly between 1 and 3 months. We've seen that you've written, goodness, over 30 books in what, just over a decade. So certainly prolific. But I mean, how many books and indeed stories, because you're also writing graphic novels, there are short stories. What would you say is your output in a typical year?
Um, I would say 3 or 4 books a year. Um, and then if comics come my way, I had a period of time where I was writing majority comics. I think that was maybe 2019 because I didn't have any books out in 2020. That was my only year I didn't have a book out, which if you're going to have a year without a book, it might as well be that one. But I got my tax return from my year of just like I was writing Spider-Man, I was writing Firefly, I was writing like I wrote all these amazing comics in some of my very favorite worlds, and I got my tax return, and like that entire year writing comics had paid less than my cheapest book I've ever sold. And I was like, I don't know if I need to do 100% comics because I'd like to pay the bills. Oh my gosh, comics are hard, but they're fun. So I do kind of miss them, but yeah, it's I mean, I can write a normal comic is 2022 issues, so I write one of those in 2 or 3 days, pretty much. But yeah, no, I my whole job basically is to write a chapter a day if I'm working on a book. So if that's a kid book, it's maybe 2,000 up to 3,000 for an adult book, and if as long as I do that or edit 50 pages, I'm pretty satisfied with my life.
And so, do you work on only one book at a time, or do you have one book that you're writing and one book that you're editing simultaneously? And then, if an issue for a comic comes in, do you take a quick break? Because, as you said, it's only 2 or 3 days, so it would probably not make sense to be like, let me finish this entire novel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in an ideal world, I would only, when I was first drafting a book, I wouldn't do anything else. But this is not an ideal world, and there's a lot going on. And I've also kind of, you know, grown my muscles to the point where, in my first couple years, it would have been really hard for me to put down the hot laundry of a first draft and then come back a day or two later. Whereas now I'm just used to it. So it's like right now I'm writing a horror novella, and then I'm revising a book for my agent to take out. And so while normally I would go ahead and finish the first draft, I'd really like to sell this book. So I'm going to try to power through the edit, in a couple of days. But lots of times I can write. Um, I prefer to edit in the morning because you need a lot of brain for editing. So I'll try to edit 50 pages in the morning, and then, do my workouts or my art project or whatever I'm doing. And then in the afternoon or evening, my brain feels very fluid and good at storytelling. And then I'll try to, get my chapter out. And on a good day, I can do them both. But yeah, in an ideal world, I wouldn't let anything stop me first drafting. But man, this book has had to put up with. I did a little mini tour when House of Idyll came out, and I've got this revision I'm working on. I've got a comic I wrote that hasn't been announced yet. So things happen.
And I understand on top of that, you've written a number of screenplays, but what I'm not so clear about is when you wrote them and how they fit into the picture. So I'm not sure if this is something you did before and you're not actively doing. So I'd love to know a little bit
Oh.
about that part too.
Yeah, that's a weird one. I had an idea. So I wrote this short story called Cat Call, um, that I really enjoyed. I believe it was for Uncanny magazine, and then Gary Whitta invited me to put it in his Resist anthology. At which point Hugh Howey read it and thought that it would make a good movie and hooked me up with his Hollywood agents. We had a lot of phone calls. They were very encouraging, kind. They really wanted me to write some scripts. So I wrote an original script that I was super excited about, and they didn't like it. And I looked at their notes, and when the first time I ever got notes on a book, I was like, "Oh my god, this is a cheat sheet. Like I'm going to level up. This is the keys to the planet. I can do this now." And I mean, okay, granted, the first time I get notes, I go through a day of grief, but once I go over the grieving process, I'm just like, this magical person has given me a cheat sheet. But I got their notes on my scripts, and I was like, I think that this is wrong, but I don't know enough to fight it, and it makes me not want to write any more scripts. So I have written two scripts, and they didn't like either of them, and I just kind of slowly gave up. Um, but I also like, if you run the odds of whether or not I can sell a book that I've written, they're pretty good odds. I can do that from home. I have an agent in place who is eager to sell my books. Whereas a script, I am unknown. Um, there's all these other things in place. So I would love to write scripts in the future. I feel like I was pretty good at it, but I still kick around the idea of turning that script into a book, because it's like, okay, if somebody doesn't want the script, but I also don't know what else to do with the script. If these agents don't like it, then who else do I take it to? And I don't really have the time to learn, a third industry. I know publishing, and I know comics. And it's like, you know, maybe it'd be cool to look into scripts too, but as long as I've got a full plate of stuff to do, I just haven't really put any more eggs into that basket.
Well, I
Yeah,
know
I said to
that
'em, I was like, "Okay, I've got this script. It's Misery meets Heathers." And they were like, "Well, no, you have to pick one." And I was like, "Pretty sure that's not how log lines work. You pick two and you cross them. That's what a log line is." Oh man.
Misery Meets Heathers is a compelling pitch to me. What are they talking about?
I don't know. So yeah, if anybody hears this and you'd like to read my Misery meets Heathers script and take it to Hollywood, we've parted ways since then, and I'm available.
There you go. No, somebody needs to do that. That you've you've sold me on it. If only I was somebody who selling it to meant a damn thing. But
Ah.
we've got a number of people in the industry who do listen, so you know who to contact. And I mean, the British horror writer Adam Neville, he's written a lot of screenplays, and I know that some of the ones that he didn't sell, he then wrote the novel version. So a number of his more recent novels in the last 10 or so years have originally been screenplays that he then fleshed out. So I mean, if you talk about a roadmap and having a plan, if you take your screenplay and then you turn that into a novel, I think it's a viable way of doing it. And then maybe because one would assume that the book would be quite cinematic, perhaps you've now enhanced your chances of that being adapted into a film, or they could take the script that already exists that you've written.
Yeah, it's like I'll get to a place where it's pretty rare that I get to a place where I don't know what I'm writing next, but every now and then I'll be like, "Oh, I could do anything. What'll I do?" And I very rarely think I should go back to that thing I already did. So I haven't, thought to turn I haven't had the I've had the idea, but not like the impetus to turn the screenplay into the book. But also, I brought it up to my agent recently, because I'm getting to that place where I'm running out of things to write that aren't under contract, and she wants me to write YA, and I was like, I've got a great story. It's Misery Meets Heathers, and she was like, YA contemporary horror is not selling, and I was like, okay. So publishing is weird right now.
Yeah, and it seems like as well, but I guess like this is only an issue because of your prolificism and because you've got so many books, but you're then kind of having these conflicts of contracts. You're then having to work out, right, what can
Yeah.
I am I actually able to I mean, not to write because you can technically write anything, but what can I write that can then be
What am I
shot?
allowed to write?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Which is how the novellas came about, because they're not considered full length works.
yeah, yeah. I don't know what happens kind of next. I mean, goodness, you're doing novels, you're doing novellas, you're doing comics, but you're still quicker than the contracts allow. You
Yeah,
could
I think
go.
one time a publisher was like, we would like Delilah to slow down and write less, and I was like, then you're going to have to pay me more, because that's how that works.
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Have you serialized novels? Is that I mean, I'm trying to think what's the gap? What have you not done yet? Can you go
I
old
would like to
school?
do.
Yeah.
I could do chapter books or picture books. I could go down. I have some friends who are doing the writing on cookbooks, because they're putting out a lot of, like the Stardew Valley cookbook and the Wednesday cookbook, which my friend Mary wrote. Where it's like that could be, maybe a thing that I could ask to do. But um, right now, I have one and a half books and two short stories and a comic to write before Christmas. So, like, I'm good.
Yeah. And if you were writing cookbooks, I understand that might also incorporate another passion. I believe you're a fan of the show Bake Off.
Oh yeah. Oh, I just finished the episode, this week's episode today. Yeah, I can't eat gluten. So I have had to become a pretty decent baker, and so watching Great British Baking Show is kind of like the most exquisite torture. Where like you can't have it, and even if you could have it, you can't have it. I
I
think there was a couple of
completely
years ago, Howard was cooking with a lot of gluten-free flours, and that was very exciting. But for the most part, it's all verboten.
I completely relate. I haven't eaten gluten for about nearly 2 decades now. And so, like to begin with, like if I was looking at recipes, I'd look for gluten free. But recently, and it's probably happened with you too, I've become so kind of adept in terms of how to adapt these recipes. It's like, right, find the original because that's normally the good stuff and then like let's just make our own substitutions. So there's a lot of like using rice flour or possibly almond flour or any kind of alternative gluten-free flour, but I do tend to find rice flour is better than almond flour just because it's a more neutral taste.
Well, I mean, over here, the gluten-free flours have gotten so good that, they have kind of like a mixture that gives you a little bit of chew and then the stickiness, and they've already got the xanthan gum in there. So, I have my two preferred brands, and I just buy whichever one is cheaper at the time that I need to buy flour. Because almond flour just adds a lot of calories. Um, so yeah, I think I use One for One and King Arthur, and it's like that's fine. And over the years, we've developed, we have like a recipe box where we have found our favorite. Like you try the different recipes, and then you get when you're like, oh, this is it. This is the best one we've ever done, and that one goes in the recipe box. So you don't have to go online and sift through them. But it's like gluten-free brownies is the hardest one because brownies you need that kind of toothsome chew, and it's really hard to get. So once you find a gluten-free brownie recipe, you're like, no other. This is it.
Yeah, I think the flour that, like, if I want to buy an all-purpose one, and people listening are like, "Hang on, what the fuck? I thought this was a horror show.
This
What?"
is okay. So my book Bloom is very baking adjacent. So this
Yeah,
we can just
yeah,
segue.
yeah. But the flour brand for me, I think it's called something like Bob's Old Mill or
Yeah,
something like
that's
that. That's the
not the chickpea one, but the regular flour one is pretty good.
right. Yeah,
The chickpea one, you're
yeah.
like, I don't want to eat a bean cake.
Yeah, you don't want something where the flavor is too distinctive. But talking about distinctive, we're back to your writing because you have such a distinctive voice, and I want to talk a little bit about House of Idyll and Guillotine, both of which I really see as companion pieces. And for people watching the video, they are behind you, they are in view.
Yep.
And I mean, thematically, they're both very much about power, about abuse of power, about wealth, of longing for fame or artistic success, and of course about manipulation. So let's start with House of Idol because that is the latest one. What was the origin story and the genesis when it came to writing this book?
Well, that is another thing it has in common with Guillotine is that they both came from BuzzFeed articles.
There
Um,
you go.
so yeah, for House of Idyll, there was a BuzzFeed article that just had a picture of Jared Leto wearing like white Jesus robes and aviator sunglasses with his hair billowing in the breeze, walking along the beach, followed by like 30 people wearing white. And it was like, is Jared Leto starting a cult? And I was like, I don't know, is he? Just thinking about it, where you're like, that's Jordan Catalano that I used to watch on My So Called Life, and then he was in Fight Club, and then he got a Oscar and a Grammy, and then he went platinum, and now he sells out stadiums, and now he runs a cult. And so, without digging too deep, I just kind of extrapolated from that. How would someone get that many accolades and that many good breaks and that much luck? And then I came to my own conclusions about how insane wealth is garnered.
Yeah, and in terms of the musical influence, I mean, that is, of course, very present throughout, particularly because, I mean, you've got liner notes that I believe start every chapter, and you've got
Yes.
different albums that seem to be different
Yes. Yeah.
seasons of the band. So we're again, we're
Hmm.
visually getting that now, so that this is
Yes.
why you gotta watch the video version.
You're having show and tell.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, were you listening to music whilst writing? Do you listen to music whilst writing? And if so, is that to evoke a mood, or is it just anything goes?
Well, when I first started out, like I said, I had to kind of immediately get into the mood to write the second I had a chance to write because I had very limited time. So I would condition myself through playlists. I would make a playlist that felt like the book, and when I was driving the kids around or cleaning the kitchen, I'd be listening to it and thinking about whatever scene was happening next. So when I sat down, I could dive right in. And when I heard that song, I was like, "Yep, here, click where we're going." I don't really have to do that anymore because I have, as much time as I need. But on Spotify, I'm Delilah S. Dawson, and there are book playlists going all the way back to Wicked as They Come, um, that are named after the books that they're named after. There's one for House of Idyll that are songs that feel like House of Idyll, just because it seemed like the right thing to do, to put in songs that felt like the book. Um, but yeah, this one is really cool. So Titan, they bought the book Bloom that I wrote for my daughter. That's my girl Hannibal, and um, authors don't always get a ton of input into their covers, but I had a real idea for what I wanted, so I made a piece of artwork and I put it up on my Instagram and I tagged my editor and was like, if I could have whatever cover I wanted, it would look like this. And so the cover they did was based on my piece of artwork, but vastly improved because Julia Lloyd is amazing. So Bloom was just the prettiest book I'd ever had made. Like, it's got the end papers and the cover. It's so beautiful. Um, and then they did Guillotine too, and it's so pretty. And then I stopped in London on my way to a French Star Wars convention and went and met my publishing team at Titan. And I got to meet Julia, the cover artist, and meet my editor. And I had grown enough familiarity with them that when this book was being written, where I was like, hey, I've got liner notes. What if we did a little CD thing? And like, but I've written out all the different albums because they go through little phases. Like, they start and they're kind of, punk pop phase, and then they move into kind of emo, and then they have like their kind of spiritual phase, and then they get into their more theatrical phase. So there's the different album names and the different songs. And I was like, what if we did the liner notes? Like, you don't have to do a whole stuff, but just maybe like a different little piece of artwork. And they were totally on board for it. Um, so I feel really grateful that I had the experience of, they were so open to my artistic thoughts previously that I felt comfortable asking for that, because it's, you know, it takes that kind of relationship, I think, sometimes, to have the idea and the audacity to do these kind of weird things with books that you've never done before. Like, I've never written song lyrics before, but actually my husband has turned one of those songs into a song you can listen to. So the book is just very music themed from front to back.
Is that something we can listen to online? Is that available?
It is pretty much anytime I put House of Idyll on my Instagram, it's used in the video. It's in the official trailer for House of Idyll. So I can post that again if people want to hear it. But yeah, my husband plays guitar and piano and studies music theory. He's written his own musical, so he was like, pick a song you like, write out the whole lyrics, and if you can like hum something for me. And so I hummed it for him, and he made it into a song, which is just so freaking cool. So yeah, it's in the official trailer,
Yeah, it
and we
is.
played it. I did a quick little book tour, and I stopped at the Twisted Spine in Brooklyn, which is the most amazing horror bookshop. If you're ever near Brooklyn, they are incredible, and we played it there for the audience. That was really fun.
It is becoming clear just how multifaceted and talented your husband is. Like, every question, there seems to be a new talent that I discover about him. So I'm not only learning about you, but I'm learning all about him and his
Yeah,
various
we've been
skills.
together since we met my freshman year of college, and we had one kind of year off of temper tantruming, but other than that, we've been together since then.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I mean, one must assume then he's into similar music to you to have, written the song for your book as well. But it sounds like your music taste is fairly varied anyway.
It is. I think when I was younger, I was much more attracted to sad music, and I think I used it to help, get my feelings out. Now, most days walking around, I'm like an 8 or a 9 out of 10 on the happiness scale. I'm just a happy little guy, and like, unless something really terrible happens, I'm in a good mood. So I mostly listen to happy music. I've been into K-pop lately. I listen to BTS and Stray Kids. Weezer's one of my favorite bands of all times. Ghost, My Chemical Romance, The Cure. And yeah, The Cure. Some of their sad stuff still gets me, and they're on all my playlists. But yeah, I like being happy these days, so I don't dwell as much kind of in the darkness as I used to. But if you listen to the House of Idyll soundtrack, there's a lot of darkness in it, if not necessarily sad. Like, the Deftones feel like every Deftones songs to me feels like you're just hurtling through space amidst the stars. that kind of feel to it.
And I wonder, is there anything that you attribute your happiness to, or was there a pivotal moment when, you went from being rather sad and, like very understandably, given what we've learned about you through this conversation and from your childhood, but was there a turning point where you became happier?
There's a couple of signpost moments. I was uh, pretty unhappy as a kid. A lot of my poetry was very sad. So I had a suicide attempt in high school, and I lived through it. And I remember that day just sitting outside and being like, the wind on my skin feels really nice, and like the sand in my toes feels really nice, and this is the best meal I've ever eaten. It's like they say in Fight Club, like today will be the best day of Raymond K. Hessel's life. Like everything after that, I was like, this is pretty good. I like writing with a pen. I like looking at fish, and I was just a much happier person because I realized in that moment I really didn't want to die. So since then, I've had a much happier outlook. I'm also like a very sensitive person, what they call it, like a hypersensitive person, where like noise physically pains me. If I'm too hot, I can't function. If there's a tag in my shirt, I can't think of anything else. So all through college, everybody just thought that I was a really complainy bitch, and it turns out I was just super sensitive and did not have a way to communicate it. So it's like as I got older and learned to better anticipate my life's needs and not put myself into bad situations, I was less and less unhappy because I wasn't doing stupid things that made me really unhappy. And then after having kids, something else broke in me. Like I said, my brain just changed where I was much more easygoing because suddenly, instead of me worrying about my needs, I have to keep these two people alive. And so at each of those points, it was like, you make the decision where you're like, well, I can be a real miserable jerk, or I could just kind of be happy. So now I'm very happy go lucky and have, I call it, oh, well, where it's like something bad happens. And you're like, oh, well, I'm going to keep going. Like, you can't really stop me. It's just going to keep happening. So it's been a lot of changes. People who knew me, in high school, I'm a different person in a lot of ways and a lot less miserable, but I also wasn't aware how much sensory input really upset me. And as I've watched my daughter grow up with something very similar, except she's free to express it, whereas I wasn't. My dad just thought that I was a complainer who did nothing but complain. And whereas with her, we were like, oh, you're in physical pain. Let's help you with that. In helping her understand herself, I've understood myself better and understood, I'm on the spectrum and I have ADHD and my brain is real weird and not normal. So that's all these kind of little epiphanies that lead the way to where you're like, oh, I just doing all right now.
And when did you discover that you had ADHD, and what do you think were some of the kind of realizations or pivotal moments that then helped you live a better life, knowing that about yourself?
Well, it started with I have synesthesia, and it became an issue in kindergarten because I would constantly correct my teacher. Every day they would put a letter on the wall, and it was always the wrong color, and so I would be like, this is wrong. W is not yellow. W is pink. And she'd be like, no, this is the color pink. And I'd be like, yeah, dummy, I know what pink is, and that's the wrong color. And so I would get letters sent home saying that I was argumentative and that I didn't understand my colors. And really, I was trying to explain that, like, no, A should be red, not green. Like, you've got this very wrong. Um, so I didn't know what any of this was, and my mom didn't understand what I was saying either. And I just thought that all numbers and letters were colorful for everyone all the time, and we had all agreed on this. And yet the teachers were jerks about it. So when I was about 17, I found out that synesthesia was a thing that existed, and it was like, oh my god, this whole time I thought everybody did that. Like, I did not know I was weird at all. It was startling. So that was kind of the first time I realized that there was something that was going on and that I had felt like an alien my whole life. And there was kind of at least this one small reason. Um, but I was like a very high achiever. I was the high school valedictorian. I graduated college with honors. I was just that kind of person. And then didn't think about it for a long time because, when you grow up in a kind of oppressive household where your needs are kind of shoved down, you just find processes that allow you to function. Um, so that you don't inconvenience the adults that will punish you if you make them mad. Whereas my parents would be like, we are going to feed you a milkshake and then put you in the back of a car with no air conditioning and driving on the highway. Why are you always sick? You're always sick. Stop being sick. You're like, maybe don't give a kid a milkshake in 90-degree weather on the highway. But they never thought that. They just thought that I was annoying. Anyway, when my son was in elementary school, he had a really bad time and we pulled him out of school. Um, and I started homeschooling him. And within a couple days, I was like, "Oh, dude, you've got ADHD." But I didn't know this because he did most of his learning at school, and I just saw him as a really energetic kid, and I had to help him get his energy out in specific ways. And it was just like me as a kid, where I was like, "You need help, I will help you process it. This is fine. If I need to hit you with pillows every night until you can go to sleep, that's fine." But then I realized that there was actually something going on, so we went and got him his full diagnosis, and immediately kind of doors started unlocking where it's like we could help him and we could help teachers understand him, and we could go to the school and say, hey, give us your nicest, sweetest teacher. Don't give us a mean old battle axe. Don't put him in honors classes. Just be nice to him. And it changed everything because he went from a kid who hated school to a kid who didn't mind it. Um, and then my daughter um, started having some things too. And so we got her diagnosed and we found out that she was autistic and had ADHD. And the first diagnosing doctor didn't catch the autism, and my daughter was super mad. She was like, "You did this because you told her I was normal." And I was like, "You are normal." And she was like, "No, all that stuff is weird, but you do it too. So you don't know what normal is. You think it's normal to line up your My Little Color Ponies in color order." And I was like, "That is normal." And she was like, "No, it's not. Normal people don't eat their Skittles in color order." And I was like, "What do they do? Just eat them out of the bag like a monster?" And she was like, "Yes." And I was like, "That's disgusting." So after we got her diagnosed, she was like, "Buddy, I've got some news for you." And then we got mine. And I was like, that my whole life I thought I was an alien and that I didn't understand people at all. And the first time I went on a date with my husband, I called my mom and said, "I don't know what I am, but I found another one." And so it was like this whole beautiful situation where we just all found out we're just weird as hell. And we were like, "Oh, that's what's happening." Um, and it was just really lovely and comforting and amusing, and it just answered a lot of questions. And then you trace it back to, like, my grandmother who couldn't touch soft things, and my grandfather who only cared about tomatoes and the law, and my great grandfather who could build a building without drawing plans and could just knew how where to cut the wood. And you're just like, oh, this went way back, but nobody ever thought, oh, Jewel is autistic. They were like, man, that guy can build a house. So it's been wonderful.
And so, for people who are listening who either have children with ADHD or they teach children with ADHD, what would you kind of advise in terms of things to do and things not to do? What could be helpful in kind of making their lives easier?
Well, kids who have ADHD, especially boys, hear like 10 times more criticism than regular kids. It's just this constant barrage of sit still, be quiet, sit down, study harder. You're not doing this. Stop doing that. Stop fidgeting. Their whole lives, this is just what they hear. The biggest change for my son was we put him in a private school and we said to the teachers, if you make him sit in a chair and not move, you're going to hate each other. If you just let him move around the room, it's great. He just wants to be in constant motion and he will listen to you and he will do fine. And he did. Um, so, when something isn't working, I think the biggest understanding was he would act out and we thought, oh, he's being manipulative or, he's trying to get what he wants. Yeah, what he wants is to not be in pain. And for kids whose brains work in a different way, sitting still is pain. Not being able to ask a teacher questions without getting in trouble is pain. It hurts them. And they are trying to escape that. So just letting him be himself and learn in his specific way was a life changer. We found a wonderful therapist who had ADHD and was on the same kind of vibe as him that he could just talk to, which helped a lot. And just being told, like, you're okay this way. We love you. This is all right. Like, your teacher was a jerk. No one ever said that to me when I was a kid. They said, well, if the teacher didn't like you, then you must be doing something wrong. And I was like, I hate that woman. Mrs. O'Connor is a jerk. She's a bad person. She made you, an innocent child, feel bad for being yourself. That's not how to be an adult. I will take my dislike of that woman to the grave. Um, but yeah, it's, understanding and just unconditional love. And it's like I understood with him that every day we had to throw the football or go for a walk or kick the soccer ball or play basketball, that there had to be this physical component to get the energy out so that he could relax to what the rest of us consider normal. And so that's what we did. We had games where we would hit each other with pillows, or I would throw stuffed animals at him, but it was like there had to be this physical kinetic exchange of energy. And then that's what made it okay. Whereas my daughter needed to be alone in a cold, dark room and not be touched. Complete opposite of that. So it's just figuring out what someone needs and helping them obtain it in a way that works for everyone.
I think the theme of today's conversation is just empathy and understanding and listening to people.
Let people be weird.
Yeah, yeah. And to go back to House of Idyll, because this is also the theme of the conversation, just jumping wildly from
It's
topic
on
to
brand.
topic. Yeah, there you go. And it is certainly on brand for this as horror as well. That is kind of how I do things. And I mean, in a sense, this is a twisted love story. And I mean, what one of the moments where it's like, wow, the kind of Jesper Idol, the antagonist, I suppose, he doesn't operate by normal rules, is when he's done something shitty to the protagonist Angelina, and his response is to write a full-on song as an apology. So where did that moment come from?
I mean, I feel like it came from Say Anything.
Yeah.
The moment where Lloyd Dobler holds up the boombox and everybody swooned as a kid and as an adult. I'm like, oh my god, he's such a bad boyfriend. Like, girl, run away from him. Like, oh, the difference in how you see that movie from a 14-year-old to an adult. But that idea that there's this kind of little boy that just thinks, if I make a grand gesture, I can keep being crappy and I don't have to apologize or change at all. But because that, I mean, for most of us, if you took the lead singer of our favorite band, who is beautiful and interested in us, if he wrote us a personal song, most of us would just kind of black out and be like, oh my God, he's amazing. So, yeah.
And this is the dichotomy that the protagonist Angelina is constantly up against, because on one hand she's been invited to this luxurious compound for this kind of half retreat, half cult, this thriving community, but and she's loving it at points, and particularly, as you say, she's got the affection of this man who she has idolized, who she has looked up to, but then she'll have other moments where it's like, wait a minute, there is something deeply wrong going on. But then, because of who Jasper is, and this is whole the kind of power dynamic and the abuse of power, she will allow these things to slide. So you've got this back and forth, which obviously creates great dramatic tension for the reader and the story throughout.
Yeah, um, part of writing horror is that your main character has to uh, they have to have some reason to ignore the red flags, because if they saw the red flags, there wouldn't be a story. Like if the family and the poltergeist walked in the house and felt the vibe and turned around and walked back out, we wouldn't have poltergeist. So Angelina kind of, starts with nothing on the worst day, where she has the choice. But each time there has to be a reason for her to, uh, you know, willfully ignore the red flags or be able to ride away the red flags. So, if you haven't read House of Idyll, it's about someone who is invited, a singer songwriter who's invited into uh, the kind of all expenses paid, luxury, artistic think tank compound that's sponsored by her favorite band growing up. If you can imagine, like the biggest band in the world. We all wish that billionaires would use their money for good, and this one is. They have this place where they are nurturing the next generation of artists, paying for your tiny house and your food and your electricity. So instead of struggling to hold down a job, you can just focus on your art, which sounds great. And I think it's also kind of like, Angelina's having one experience. The other artists that have been invited into the House of Idyll, the luxury compound, they're having a different experience in the same way that if you have a field full of sheep, all of the sheep are having a pretty good time, except the one that gets chosen to go into the back of the barn. For all of the other sheep, they're like, this is great. There's grass, there's no predators. I'm having the best day. But for that one sheep, they're like, oh, wait, this doesn't feel good to me. But we just happen to be following that sheep instead of the ones that are having a good time. So, from one point of view, the band is doing a mitzvah. They're doing a good thing and they're helping the next generation. It's just that someone has to pay the price for that because such things are not communally free.
Yeah, the two things that I've watched relatively recently that I thought were kind of in the same genre as both House of Idyll and Guillotine are the movie The Menu, which I
Yep.
then saw was actually one of your comparison pieces for Guillotine.
Yeah,
And
it came out
then
after Guillotine was written, and I was like, "Oh God, this is really close."
yeah, so as I was reading it, I was thinking, I think you would really like The Menu. I feel this is a kind of similar piece. And then the other thing that it reminded me of to some point was there was a Netflix TV series with Nicole Kidman called The Perfect Couple. And I think particularly because of the whole power and wealth and the signing of NDAs, that was kind of what sealed it for me. But yeah, it's just this marvelous subgenre of exploitation, which now sounds problematic to call it, but it is. It is marvelous for storytelling. Certainly, it's so ripe for possibilities.
Yeah, it's I also have "It'll Only Hurt for a Moment," which is set at an artist's retreat. Um, but because I've started going to this writer's retreat now, I've got this sense of, under the right circumstances, a retreat is such a gift. You get to go away from your life to this place where things are taken care of, and you can focus on your art or relax. But in doing so, you are vulnerable in a different way. And if there is a power dynamic caused by a wealth disparity, things get really weird. It's very fun to play with, and it's very fun to take the expectation of, oh, this will be a very nice time, and then be like, but what if it wasn't?
Yeah, it sounds like you are not done playing in this particular arena, and there's something so fast paced and compulsive about your style as well, which is very attractive and appealing because I mean when we start a story by you, we are thrown in to the moment. There's no messing about. We know who the characters are, we know what the stakes are, and we are put into what usually becomes one of the worst moments of their life.
Yeah, you have a book like The Violence, just a big chunker, and it's almost like killing somebody with toenail clippers, just clipping at them forever. And a short story is kind of like being stabbed in the gut. And these novellas, you only have half a novel, so you kind of got to get in there and get out pretty fast. So they do have to ramp up pretty quickly. or at least have some creeping dread injected pretty early.
And so when you're writing each chapter, particularly because it sounds like not every chapter is meticulously planned, when you know that the chapter is about to end, are you almost having impulsively, if there's nothing planned, having to make a snap decision? It's like, right, what bad thing is going to end this moment?
Yeah, you always have to end a chapter on some reason to make people turn the page. When I teach writing classes, I always use the example of like you can say, and then she fell asleep happily in her bed. You can end it that way, and then the person reading the book is like, cool, she's safe. I can put this book down and get on with my life. But if you say, and then she fell asleep in her bed until she woke up to screaming, suddenly they have to turn the page to find out why they're screaming. So, it's always fun to kind of torture people and draw them through the book in that way. Um, but it is also really fun in that because horror books for me are such an exploration and an adventure. Sometimes I get to the end and I don't know what's going to happen next, and that's I think that happened at one point in this where I was like, oh, what if she just hears horses screaming? And then the next day I had to figure out why the horses were screaming. I didn't know. We figured it out.
Yeah, I mean, you achieved the idea of keeping people turning the page. You just created a new problem for yourself.
But it's also like it's challenging, it's fun. I mean, it's like every day I wake up and I start the day by doing a whole series of puzzles with connection strands, wardle, dordle, quartle, octortle, actorly, squaredle, blossom. Like I love that kind of improv level of okay, now you have to do the thing. Like I really thrive in that. I think that's why I do a lot of panels at Comic Cons more so than I would do, say, a keynote speech, because I feel like I'm better in that improv position of this is happening right now, and now we have to perform as compared to at home, me coming up with a speech. I don't enjoy that nearly as much as being on the spot.
And so, of course, as well, this kind of dramatic writing is incredibly cinematic. So we mentioned you writing two screenplays, but do you have any film or TV adaptation news or possibilities in the future? Because it seems insane to imagine a world where these are not made into movies or television series.
I feel that way every day. Like I have so many friends who have things in the works, and I don't know why my work doesn't get into those same hands. We sold the rights to Lady Castle, my comic, briefly. We got all the way to a great script, Jennifer Hutchinson, and then Disney ate New Line Cinema or whatever. Whoever had owned whatever, it ate them, and they killed every project. And then the violence was also in the works. Frida Pinto's company had bought that, and we were really excitedly moving forward. And then that company got eaten by another company. So that is my dream. Like every time my email bings, I think maybe this time I'll get to see something of mine on the screen, but it hasn't happened yet. But God, I want it to.
Well, fingers crossed, and you're writing enough exciting stories that come on. There's over 30 of them. Somebody's got to
Well, I
pull the
mean, House
plug
of
on.
Idyll would be so fun, and
I
it like
think so.
it's very Interview with the Vampire season 3. Like we're about to have the
Yeah,
vampire rock star Lestat. Like why not?
yeah, yeah. I mean, if any of them were tailor made for that kind of TV miniseries, it's House of Idyll right there.
Well, and then Guillotine would be very fast and fun, and Bloom would be super easy. Like all you need to film Bloom is like two houses in North Georgia. Like it is not hard. Oh
Hey,
man.
yeah, there you go. So we're hoping now that film executives are listening so that they can make that happen. But it is the film in terms of the film rights, is that something that your literary agent is also kind of connected and involved in, or is there a separate media rights agent? How does that work?
Yeah, I have a media rights agent with ICM. I have she sells like I share an agent with several of my friends, and she's able to sell stuff for them. So I don't know why my stuff. It seems like if you have one project that gets, up into that orbit, and gets people talking, they tend to buy more and more of your stuff. But it's like you have to reach a level of crucial mass and an excitement around one project before they buy the next ones. But I don't know why my work doesn't get there.
Well, hopefully it is more a case of when rather than if. So, as I say, I'll be keeping my fingers crossed anyway.
Me too.
And so we have mentioned you writing for comics, but what I'm interested in is how did that happen? How did you get your start?
This is a fun story. Okay, so I was trying to break into comics, as soon as I started getting novels published, but I can tell you how to get a novel traditionally published. I can't tell anyone how to get a comics published. There is no one way to do it. Everybody who came to it sideways. So um, I managed to get into the Monkey Brain Press Boo anthology. It was a free Halloween anthology. I did not get. I think I might have gotten like $6 or something. Anyway, it was a 6 page comic. They hook you up with an artist. I got to write 3 of those. I was so grateful for it. Um, but that's all I could do. I couldn't get anything else. So I was at Gen Con in 2015, and the person running the literary track came to me and said, "Hey, do you write comics?" And I was like, "Good God, I'm trying to, but I'm having trouble." And he was like, "Oh, well, I need someone for a panel called How to Write Comics for Women because we just realized it's all white guys." So I was like, "Sure, I can do that." So I got put on this panel with Teenie Howard, Chris Roberson, Gene Ha, and Jim Zub. And the moderator was so aggressive that the Mary Sue did like a 2 day expose on it. People were real mad about it. It was just a misogynistic, bigoted, uh, on the side of the moderator. All of the panelists were lovely and were trying really hard to steer this in the right direction, but it was a mess. And I ended up at one point saying, like, I can't break into comics. I can't get my foot in the door. I don't know why. I have, these books out. I have a good reputation. I don't know if it's related to being a woman, but boy, am I having a hard time. And apparently, a editor at Boom Press read the Mary Sue article and read my quote about that and emailed me and said, if you'd like to pitch me, I'd love to hear it. And so I pitched him comics, and he chose Lady Castle, and that was my first comic. So the worst panel of my life became my key to comics. And of course, when I sold the comic, I had never written a comic, and so I had to learn very fast. And my first script was such a mess. There was so much I didn't understand. It was like 3 times longer than it should be. I had like 40 speech balloons on every page. It was just. I got my edit letter while I was at a hotel, and at the hotel they were having a Santa convention. And so I was having a nervous breakdown at the breakfast buffet, surrounded by guys dressed as Santa, going like, "Oh, it's okay, little girl." And I was like, "I can't write a comic. I'm so bad at this. I'm not used to being bad at things." So it was just, the whole experience was surreal. But I, leveled up, got the comic done, and then I got my next break in comics because I was at the time the only female writer who could write comics and who had read the script for The Last Jedi, and they needed someone to write a Rose Tico comic. And I was the only intersection of the 3 things that they needed. So I got to write my first Star Wars Adventures comics. So it's all like, nobody can replicate that. Like, I can't say like, "Oh, if you'd like to be in comics, be on a real bad panel and then be the only person that's been flown to San Francisco to read a script." Like, it's so weird and random.
Yeah, I don't think anyone wants to attempt to, replicate it because then it requires finding the misogynist to put on the panel to
You'll
begin
get
with.
yelled at by this dude.
Yeah. Yeah, I presume and I hope that after that happened in the expose that that guy is now gone from the industry.
I have not looked him up in a while, but I also haven't seen him at a con, so I'm sure he's just still raking in from whatever he'd done before, but I have not had any further contact with him, which is
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And I mean, you said, well, you couldn't tell people how to break in to comics, but you could tell people how to get a novel traditionally published. I know that my listeners will be angry with me if I don't follow up on that. So, for those who are looking to get traditionally published, what advice could you give them?
Well, if you don't know the method, the quick version is you have to have a fully written, well edited, copy edited book. You don't have to pay anybody to do that. You can do it yourself. But you have to have a complete book. You can't sell an idea. You learn how to write a query letter, which I would suggest doing that by reading the Query Shark blog, which is where Agent Janet Reed tears apart queries in real time and tells people exactly what she's thinking and how to fix them. There's over 300 on that site, and if you've read them all, you are going to be in a very good position and better than 90% of querying writers. Then you use Query Tracker and Agent Query and I think even MSWL these days, but there are these sites that help you find agents where you can search, where you can say, okay, well, I'm writing a middle grade book and I'm looking for, an agent who's open to submissions and it'll hook you up with them. Then you send them your query letter and keep a spreadsheet of who you've queried and who you haven't. I used to send out 3 queries at a time. If I sent out 5 queries and got all flat rejections, I would rewrite the query from the ground up because that told me that the query wasn't working. Once I started getting some nibbles, I would keep that query. And if the first pages got rejected, I realized I had to fix my first pages. Don't use diarrhea on the first page. I did that for a while. It was real bad. They don't like that. Um, so yeah, it's if you're going to be looking into getting published, um, look at Writer's Digest has classes and information. Um, be sure to look at Writer Beware, which will tell you about the names of fake agents and vanity publishers and general people that will prey on you because there's lots of money to be made off of new writers who haven't done all of their research. But yeah, basically the query process is you just keep sending out query letters. Um, if you run out of agents to query without getting an agent, you write a new book. I would say, like we said earlier, just start writing the new book while you're querying the first time around to take your mind off of it. But yeah, like that's the process. You can query infinite books, like nobody's counting. Nobody is keeping track of that. You can query as many books as you want, and every book that you write, every word that you write helps you level up and get the skills to, hopefully get the help of an agent. And that's how you get traditionally published, which is how I wanted to go from the start because I don't want to be in charge. I don't want to choose my covers and do my own marketing and find a distributor and figure out how to do an ISBN. It just sounds like a lot of work.
And so I wonder, since becoming traditionally published, does that alter at all what you write in terms of either stylistically or the content or creative decisions that you make? Or are you are writing whatever story comes to mind, whatever character decisions present themselves to you? I'm just wondering if there's a difference in approach now that you're published.
I mean, I always wanted to be published, so I always wrote from the position of, I want to write things that will get traditionally published. So I wasn't, writing a Amish erotica slasher. I was always, trying to hit that vein and tap into it. Um, so I do think about, sellability and what's going on, but at the same time, when I get an idea that really, really gets me excited. There's been several times that I've run the idea past my agent, and my agent has said, "It's not really selling." And I've been like, "Don't care, doing it anyway." The main one of which was Wake of Vultures. My agent at the time was like, "Please don't write that. I can't sell a Weird West." And I was like, "Don't care, writing it anyway. I already got the tattoo. We're doing this." And that book sold, and it's earned out, and it's gotten multiple stars from things, and it won 2 awards. And so sometimes when your heart tells you something is strong enough, that will find ready soil in readers' hearts as well. Other times I have done that same thing, been like, "Don't care, writing it anyway," and then it didn't sell, and I was like, "You were right. I'll do something else." um, but you just have to be ready. So much of being a traditionally published writer is rolling the dice, and sometimes the dice are not going to come up the way you want.
So I'm wondering, what is it that frightens you?
I mean, it's like these days it's just the main thing that frightens me would be like something happening to the people that I love is kind of, the big one, but that's not a very fun one. Like that's not even one I want to feel around in books. I don't even know if I could read Pet Cemetery now because I have had a little blonde son that would dart into traffic. um, but I do really enjoy exploring in books the the moments when liminal spaces become frightening. Places that should feel safe and okay under the right circumstances are suddenly the scariest places on earth. I really enjoy those moments. Um, and let's see here. What's like it's I'm writing. I'm revising one horror book and writing one right now. And the one that I'm revising I have that one on the mind, and I'm thinking of like lots of the things that I included in there that are mundane but are scary. Like um, the thing that I think about every time I'm home alone is, what if I choked right now? And there's like no one here, and you can't call someone and say I'm choking. Um, it's the little stuff like that that scares me. Or the other day, I was just walking down the steps and I missed a step, and you're like, if I fell down these steps at night, like I would just die. um, so the things that scare me aren't fun, whereas the things that I like to play with, I think are pretty fun. Um, Yeah, I'm trying to think of more fun things that scare me, but it's more getting playful with things than tapping into my actual real fears. Like it's not fun to be like, I could get dementia. Like that's not fun for us to talk about, but it's terrifying. I Getting older is not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, I think about the choking thing quite a lot as well. I'm not sure I'm not sure if that is normal, but I do think about it a lot, and particularly in Japan, they have these pickled plums that have disproportionately big stones. And I think just, one time, what if it's like, right, well, that's gone down. I mean, what a silly way to go as well. It's like Michael David Wilson, he died because he swallowed a plum stone and it got stuck.
He
And
died doing what he loved.
eating pickled plums. Yeah.
Well, so when I was a kid, like I told you, my dad liked to scare me, and it wasn't in a fun way. It was in a mean way. But he had this mask that really freaked me out. I don't do well with real, not real. Like inauthenticity bugs me a lot. So he had this mask that looked like a big man's face, but it really scared me as a kid. So he would just pull it out and scare me randomly throughout the year. So one day I was just at the kitchen table eating my green beans in like April. It wasn't even near Halloween. There was no, you know, ambiance of spookiness, and he walked in with the mask on and an axe in his hand, and I went and I sucked in a green bean and I choked. And so I was there, and I we moved out of that house when I was 7, so I was pretty young, um probably 5 or 6. And I remember like he picked me up by the leg, holding, like he threw down the axe, but he still had the mask on, and he was hitting me to try to get me to unchoke. And it's like, Jesus Christ, like, no wonder I have trauma. Like, no wonder I have CPTSD. Like, that's so messed up. But like that was, I choked while being frightened by my father in a mask.
Oh my God. Was your mother supportive of you? Because there's a lot of bad things to understate it that your dad did. Like,
Yeah, it's messed
it,
up. No,
yeah.
she is my biggest fan. She thinks I am the most wonderful person, perfect, amazing person that has ever lived. Um, but and I think this is a theme that I tried to work through in the violence. She was not strong enough to protect me, and she was not strong enough to leave. And I have a lot of resentment around the things that I had to suffer because, she chose to stay in a situation that wasn't going to improve. And I mean, I remember as a kid being like, please divorce him. Like, this isn't one of the, like, don't stay together for me. Like, let's leave this. And she was like, oh, if we leave, he'll kill us. And I was like, okay, I'm 9. This is weird. Should we be talking about this? Um, but she has always been super supportive, and I have really high self-esteem because she always told, like, no matter what he told me, she was like, you are incredible, you are amazing, you are the best. Like, if kids don't want to be your friends, that's their fault, they don't know what they're missing. And I was like, yeah, she's right.
God, so it's like you got, what, a lot of your positive attributes from your mother then, and you got a lot of trauma and issues to work through from your father by the sounds of things. And did you ever later as an adult, did you try to bring up the topic with either of them and to talk about it, and I suppose to just have that conversation or to attempt closure? Not that I think, based on what you've said, your father would have been particularly open to it.
Yeah, I mean, my mom and I have discussed it many times over the years. He died in 2016. Um, but with him, what ended up happening was, like I said, he would drink a lot, and then he would choke us. Um, and then, kind of, the older I got, the worse it got. And my senior year of high school, he hit her for the first time, and that was the first time he'd hit the wall many times. And he'd broken things and windows and pictures, but he'd never hit her or me before. Um, and so we hit her for the first time, and so I'd had to go back packed in my car for a while, and so I got up and left, and at the last moment she followed me out. um, and we left, and we lived apart from him for a while, and it was very things that I didn't know now that I would be questioning about now. But we had a little apartment, where basically we were like sleeping on mattresses on the floor, like we didn't have anything in there. um, but we talked to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And that was the first person that was like, do you understand that this is abuse? Like, do you know you're being abused? And we're like, no, he doesn't know what he's just a silly guy. And she was like, no, baby, this is abuse. But she said that if he wanted to see us again and reestablish relationship, that he had to go to a Narcotics Anonymous meeting, that his drinking was so out of hand that Alcoholics Anonymous wasn't enough for him. He needed to go to Narcotics Anonymous and see, what an addict looked like. And so he went to one meeting, and what he saw and heard there, he never drank again. So, from my understanding, he never drank after that day in 1995. At my wedding, he didn't have champagne. He never drank again. And so it was almost like there was an agreement, and that in not drinking, we would never bring it up again. And if someone tried to, he would say, that's, you're lying, that never happened, I never did that, that wasn't me. Because he was blackout drunk during it. So the best we could understand is that he firmly believed that he had never done any of these things at all. And no one could convince him otherwise, and he thought that they were lies. So it was definitely one of those things that was like, we finally got to a situation where this man doesn't get mad and hurt us. Do we really need to be in a situation to make him mad enough to hurt us again, just to remind him that he used to get mad and hurt us? Or should we all just pretend that it didn't exist and maybe not get hit? So it was a very strange relationship. Like, he was a great grandfather. He was so kind to my kids. He was never mean to them. Just a completely different person. The person they knew was so different from the one that I grew up with that it was just stunning. And it was like, I would like them to have a nice relationship with him, so I just don't need to get into this. So yeah, we ignored it. It was kind of wild. Oh, and then towards the end, he got real Christian and decided that God had forgiven him. Wild.
Maybe that's why he mentioned the tattoos at the end. He was getting a little bit too confident.
Oh, no, he always hated the tattoos. Like, that was always a sticking point. He did not enjoy any of them. Or when I dyed my hair weird colors, just did not like weird things.
I just think, given what he had done, whether he did or didn't acknowledge it, I mean, he didn't. We've established
Yeah.
that it is just incredible levels to be like, but I'm still gonna criticize your tattoos. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not as if, they morph off your body and start attacking people, although,
Oh, I mean,
some people.
he called me fat every time he saw me. He would call me round boy or Bobby Hill or chunky. Yeah, I showed up for my first dance. Like my first dance was the ninth grade dance, and I walked downstairs like with my hair done and my makeup, my dress, and he went, "Oh, you're wearing that?" Like he just wasn't. I don't. He just didn't like me apparently, which like it's fine. But no, there was no. There was a very weird level of like, what if I just make this person feel bad all the time? And you're like, why? What's the gain? Does this feel good to you? Oh, bizarre.
Yeah, it's kind of a different topic, but slightly related. But when I was talking to Josh Malaman and he was talking about people who had criticized him, he was saying, often how people treat you is how they treat everyone. Or it's like this is kind of there's a lot of internalized issues. There's a lot going on. So, I mean, just the way that he was, it kind of seems more a him problem than a you problem, even though him
Oh,
doing it to you made it your
he was a
problem.
mess. No, he was a
Yeah.
mess. His dad was a very, very strict he was a state judge, so he was very emphatic on education, and he did not value sports at all. So basically, my dad was what his father hated, and so his father hated on him, and then I was again the intellectual, educated, don't like sports, and so it's I think he was taken out. It was like he was recapitulating what his dad did to him to me because I was the only child, and I was supposed to be a boy. I was born in the days before ultrasounds. They were determined I was going to be a boy. They'd bought all blue things. My name was going to be Bubba. I was going to be a track star and play football and basketball and baseball. And then I came out a girl, and they were just like, "What do we do with this? Like, we don't want this." And they told me this like constantly. It was wild. It's so weird how different parenting has changed over the years. Where it's like the thought of a parent now being like, "You're the wrong gender," and you're like, basically parents these days are just like, "You're this gender, don't be the other gender." I don't even know.
Yeah, it's don't even know what to say.
Dads. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the
But it's
the
good
next
fodder for horror books.
it is. It is, yeah, and I feel every time you tell me something a little bit redemptive about your father, we find, another kind of counter argument. It's like, well, he stopped his physical abuse, but then he almost just transferred it to mental abuse, and
Yeah.
at
Yeah, it was a
least
lot
he
worse
was
for
a
my
good
mom, but
grandfather, we can say that.
he was a good grandfather. Yeah. No, he would if he could see my son, it would be the best thing in his entire life because my son is everything I was supposed to be. Like he's a boy and a track star. It's what he wanted. And he just didn't live long enough to see it. So that is everybody's reminder to eat some fiber because all my dad ate was steak and mashed potatoes. That's literally all he ate. And he died of colon cancer. So, I started getting colonoscopies at, I, God, before 40. But yeah, big fan of colonoscopies and fiber.
There you go. There's the takeaway for the episode. Get a colonoscopy, eat
Hmm.
fiber. I mean, steak and mashed potatoes, it's nice, but you just can't have it every single meal.
No, you shouldn't.
Well, apart from eat fiber and get a colonoscopy, what advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
I mean, like at that point, it's just like if you can just hold out a little bit longer, like you can be free of this. Like you're so close. You're so close. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people that, everything that happened to me made me who I am. And so much of my writing comes from having experienced things and, um, having bad experiences and having good experiences and times that I was scared. And, I so many of my books have to do with female rage, and punishing the people that would inflict pain on female bodies. Um, And I mean that all comes from experience. So I wouldn't change that much. And going back, I would just want to assure myself like one day you're going to be so happy. Like you're going to have such a good life and you're going to wake up every day and be so happy. And every night when you're going to sleep, when you go to sleep, you won't be thinking, oh God, what if? And putting a chair under the doorknob, you will be going, tomorrow you get to wake up and have coffee and write a book. This is amazing. Like I never would have dreamed that I could have been this happy because my parents weren't this happy. I didn't know adults could just be happy weirdos living in a house full of cool stuff. And I take whatever classes I want to. I go walk by the river with my friends. If I want to eat something, I bake it or cook it. Like I have this wonderful life that I never could have dreamed of. And my kids are so cool too. Like that you just if you're not a jerk to your kids, they're just these wonderful people that live life alongside you. They're so much fun.
I know, who would have ever thought it? Just treat your children well and they'll be happy and they'll
Or at least they'll
reciprocate
know
in
they're loved. They
kind.
can't be happy all the time.
That's
The
right.
neurodivergent ones go through their moments, but they know that they're loved and
Yeah,
that they can always come home.
that's it. Well, what is the best writing advice that you've ever been given?
I mean, I would I don't think I could codify it into writing advice, but just the book Story Genius was the biggest epiphany of my writing life. And it changed a lot of things for me for the better. And I can't stop talking about how helpful that book is. If you don't read it like you're skimming through a Reader's Digest on the toilet, but you treat it like a workbook that you are working through, and you're like, this is the book. I am going to, I have an idea. I'm going to use this book and turn it into, a story. And it really has been very valuable for me. And, also I would say, it, I was a lonely kid and I had a really hard time making friends or keeping friends or understanding people. And then when I started writing and I met other writers, I found some of my best friends. And sometimes it can be very tempting to, approach the big shot in the room or to, you know, try to get in the good graces of people who have what you want. But the best relationship I have with writers came from the people that were at my level, and we kind of came up together, and when things were hard we encouraged each other. Um, and those are my best friends now. So I would say, instead of focusing on networking and building your brand, making genuine, authentic friends who are going through the same experience you are. Normal people walking down the street do not understand how harrowing it is trying to get a book published. And once you do, all of the work that goes into it, but other writers do. So I'm really grateful for, all of the people that I've gotten to meet through having, and editors and agents. Like, publishing people are just really neat people, and most of us are pretty weird.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what is next for you?
Well, I've got 4 books out next year, and hopefully 2 comics. First book I have out next year is this witchy romance called Books and Bewitchment. It's under a pen name, Isla Jewel. All of my pen names sound like my first name. So, Wake of Vultures is Lila Bowen, and then this is Isla Jewel, because if you just say Isla or Delilah or Lila, I'll look up pretty much. Um, so that is a cozy mountain witch romance that is out in February. Then I have a secret book that you can't know about. Then I have the next Shannara book with Terry Brooks, which we haven't announced the title yet. But the book is written and he likes it, and that's what's important. And then I have my next Titan novella, which I don't think we've told the name for that one, but that'll be a horror one that'll be out around Halloween. So that's everything next year. But I am Delilah S. Dawson everywhere online. So that's Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, um, and Spotify if you want to see some playlists for different various books. And then my website is delilahsdawson.com. I'm real bad at keeping up with it, but I'm that person. If you talk to me on social media, like if you have an actual question, I'll just answer it. Like that's the best way to talk to me. I find emails kind of intimidating, but social media, it's just talking to people.
All right. Well, do you have any final thoughts to leave the listeners and viewers with?
Oh man, just keep reading and gosh, there's so much good horror out now. I feel like there's just this amazing wealth of books and things happening in horror bookstores, and everybody in horror is just so nice. Um, Going to conventions and meeting people and seeing readers at book events, it feels like it's all finally kind of coming back to normal after COVID. So, just if you are a reader, thank you, and if you're thinking about reading any of my books, thank you, and if you're writing horror, good luck.
All right. Well, it's been a tremendous pleasure chatting with you and getting to learn so much about you and your writing process. And I absolutely love your books. I love what you're doing with the novella line with Titan. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on the show and getting to talk about all of these deep things.